The city never slept, not really. By day, its streets roared with horns, footsteps, and hurried conversations that vanished into the concrete haze. But at night, when the shop fronts shuttered and the lights dimmed, it breathed differently. Slower, heavier, with a tension that hung like smoke. It was in that uneasy silence that men like Charlie Krik thrived, and it was in that same silence that men like Taylor Robinson waited. Charlie wasn't a saint, and he never pretended to be. He wasn't the type to care about morality when money was involved. To most people, he was just another face in the crowd, a guy with messy dark hair, tired eyes, and a half-smirk that always looked like it carried a secret. But beneath that worn leather jacket, beneath the cigarettes and the sarcasm, was a man who dealt in shadows. Charlie Krik was an information broker, the kind who knew who was cheating who, where the drugs would land before the cops did, and whose empire was on the verge of cracking. Knowledge was power, and Charlie had it in spades. But power always came with a price, and someone had decided his bill was long overdue. That night, Charlie was cutting through the narrow back alleys of River Point, a district most people avoided after dark. The neon from the main street barely touched these corners, leaving them bathed in damp darkness. His boots crunched against broken glass, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, and his mind racing faster than he let on. He had just sold information that could ruin the wrong man. He knew it was dangerous. But the money was too good to refuse. Charlie wasn't paranoid by nature, but tonight every sound echoed louder. The distant hum of a broken street lamp, the faint splash of water dripping from rusted pipes, the whisper of a shoe scuffing against concrete, just a little too close. He stopped, tilted his head, and glanced behind him. The alley was empty, or at least it looked that way. "Get a grip, Krik," he muttered under his breath. He reached the end of the alley, where the glow of the main road's neon signs promised safety. But something pulled at him, an instinct sharpened by years of dealing with liars, thieves, and desperate men. He turned slightly, letting his eyes adjust, and for just a second he thought he saw it, a silhouette, tall and motionless, blending into the shadows. Taylor Robinson. Of course, Charlie didn't know his name yet. He only knew the shape, the presence. A shadow that didn't belong to the city. A predator's patience in the stillness. Charlie's chest tightened, but he forced himself to walk forward, to act casual, to pretend he hadn't noticed. He knew that if he ran, it would confirm what the shadow wanted: fear. And fear always made you sloppy. He reached a diner on the corner, its flickering neon sign reading Mel's in half dead letters. He slipped inside, where the smell of burnt coffee and grease greeted him like an old friend. A jukebox hummed faintly in the corner, and the waitress, gray-haired, chewing gum, barely looked up as he slid into a booth. He ordered black coffee, more for the ritual than the taste. Charlie kept his eyes on the window, where rain had begun to streak the glass. He knew he wasn't alone anymore. Whoever had been in that alley wasn't just passing through. Someone had marked him. And if there was one thing Charlie understood, it was the thin line between hunter and prey. He lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly, and thought about the deal he'd made earlier that evening. He had passed on information about a shipment, something the Robinson crew had been guarding with their lives. It wasn't the first time Charlie had crossed powerful men, but this time felt different. Because this time, it wasn't just about money. Taylor Robinson had a reputation, though Charlie had only heard whispers. He was the kind of man who didn't forgive, the kind of man who made examples out of people. Younger than most in his line of work, but twice as cold. They said his eyes were like glass, empty, reflective, giving nothing back. They said when Taylor wanted you gone, you didn't just disappear, you were erased. Charlie didn't believe half the stories he heard in his line of work. But he believed enough to know danger when it brushed against his neck. The door of the diner opened, and a gust of cold air swept in. Charlie didn't look right away. He didn't need to. His pulse already told him who it was. A man walked in, tall, lean, wearing a black coat that seemed to drink the light around him. His movements were unhurried, calculated. He didn't glance around the diner like most men did. He didn't need to. He knew exactly where Charlie was sitting. Charlie inhaled deeply on his cigarette, steadying himself. He didn't want to show fear. Not here, not anywhere. He knew men like this, men who thrived on control, on making you feel the walls closing in. The man approached the counter, ordered a coffee, and sat 2 booths away. He didn't look at Charlie. Not once. And yet the silence between them screamed louder than anything. Charlie tapped ash into the tray and muttered, "Well, Krik, looks like the devil's got your number." Outside, the rain fell harder. The streets blurred into rivers of light. The city's heartbeat drowned beneath the storm. And inside that little diner, 2 men sat in the same silence, knowing that one of them had already chosen the other's fate. Charlie didn't know it yet, but his clock had started ticking. The rain didn't let up. It fell like a curtain, smothering the city in silver noise, drowning every sound but its own. Charlie Krik sat in that diner, cigarette burning low, staring at the steam rising from his untouched coffee. Across the room, the man in the black coat, Taylor Robinson, sat motionless, his presence as sharp as a blade pressed against the back of Charlie's neck. Charlie told himself not to look, not to acknowledge him, but the pull was magnetic. He stole a glance, and in that instant, their eyes nearly met. Nearly. Taylor didn't shift, didn't blink. He sipped his coffee as if he had all the time in the world. And maybe he did. Charlie leaned back, forcing a smirk. Though the tremor in his fingers betrayed him, he knew the game. Men like Taylor didn't strike in the open. They waited. They let fear work its poison, softening the target before the knife slid in. Charlie had lived long enough in the gutter to recognize the pattern. He wasn't just being followed, he was being studied. He stubbed out his cigarette, tossed a few crumpled bills on the table, and stood. His boots squeaked on the wet tile as he walked out into the storm. The city's night air hit him hard. Cold, damp, thick with exhaust fumes. Neon signs smeared across the puddles at his feet, glowing like veins of blood. He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking without a plan, his mind racing. If Robinson was really here for him, then someone had sold him out. The only question was who. Charlie had enemies. Too many to count. But he also had contacts, and contacts could mean survival, if you knew which ones hadn't already switched sides. He needed answers, and fast. He ducked into another alley, rain dripping from the fire escapes above. His boots echoed against the walls, every step louder than the last. That's when he heard it again, a second set of footsteps, soft, measured, matching his pace a few beats behind. He didn't turn. Not yet. Instead, he stopped suddenly, lit another cigarette, and let the flame of the match reveal just enough of the darkness. For a split second, he caught the reflection of eyes staring back at him from the shadows. Cold, glass, like unblinking. Persistent bastard, Charlie muttered under his breath. Taylor didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. Charlie exhaled smoke, then chuckled low, a humorless sound that bounced off the damp brick walls. You know, if you're going to follow me all night, you could at least say hello. Still nothing. Charlie flicked his cigarette into the puddle at his feet and started walking again, this time faster. His destination came to him only when the neon sign of O'Malley's bar flickered in the distance. O'Malley was an old friend, or as close to a friend as Charlie had. A fixer, a drunk, a man who knew enough about debts to understand loyalty in its twisted form. Charlie pushed through the bar's heavy door, the warmth of stale whiskey, and sweat rushing over him. Inside, the jukebox played something slow, something forgotten, while a handful of men hunched over their drinks. O'Malley, behind the bar, raised his bushy eyebrows when he saw Charlie. "Krik," he grunted, drying a glass with a rag that was dirtier than the glass itself. "You look like hell." "Hell's where I'm headed," Charlie shot back, sliding onto a stool. "I need information." O'Malley narrowed his eyes, leaned closer. "You always need information." "What's different tonight?" Charlie glanced at the door, half expecting Taylor to walk in right then. "This time it's about survival." O'Malley poured a shot of whiskey and slid it across the bar. Charlie downed it in one gulp, letting the burn steady his nerves. He set the glass down with a sharp click. "Robinson," Charlie said quietly. The name froze O'Malley mid-motion. He set the bottle down slowly, his hand tightening around its neck. "You don't say that name in here." Charlie smirked, though his heart thudded against his ribs. "Then I guess I'm already in deeper than I thought." O'Malley leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "If Taylor Robinson's shadow is on your back, you're a dead man walking. Doesn't matter what you know, doesn't matter who you pay. He doesn't stop." Charlie's stomach twisted. He'd expected fear, but hearing it in O'Malley's voice was something else. This was a man who'd seen gang wars, murders, betrayals, and yet the mention of Robinson left him pale. "What do you know?" Charlie pressed. O'Malley shook his head. "Enough to tell you to get out of town. Tonight, leave the city and never look back." Charlie almost laughed. Almost. "You think running works against a man like him? He'll find me before I find the highway." O'Malley's silence was answer enough. The door creaked open. Charlie's pulse spiked. He didn't turn right away, but the weight in the room shifted. Every drunk at the bar seemed to sink lower into their seats, as if they wanted to disappear. Taylor Robinson stepped inside. The rain clung to his black coat, droplets sliding down like mercury. His face was unreadable, his eyes flat, scanning the bar without urgency. When they landed on Charlie, the air thickened. Charlie forced a smile. "Guess the party's moved inside." Robinson didn't answer. He simply walked to a table in the corner, sat down, and folded his hands. He didn't order a drink. Didn't acknowledge O'Malley. He just waited. Charlie swallowed hard, the taste of whiskey bitter on his tongue. He knew then, without doubt, Robinson wasn't just following him. He was cornering him piece by piece until escape wouldn't even be an illusion. The game had started, and Charlie Krik was already 2 moves behind. Charlie Krik had always believed the past was something you buried deep enough that no one could dig it up. But as he sat at O'Malley's bar, staring across the room at Taylor Robinson's motionless figure, he realized the past had a way of crawling out of the dirt on its own. And sometimes it came wearing a black coat. Robinson hadn't said a word. He didn't have to. His presence was louder than any threat. Charlie drained another whiskey, the burn doing little to quiet the tremor in his hands. O'Malley hovered nervously nearby, his usual gruffness stripped away, like even he knew this was a storm he couldn't shelter Charlie from. "You need to leave," O'Malley whispered. "Now, while he's still just watching." Charlie forced a smile, though it felt thin, fragile. Leave and go where? Robinson's not a problem you outrun. He's the kind you either buy off or bury first. But deep down, Charlie knew it wasn't that simple. Taylor Robinson wasn't some street-level enforcer chasing a paycheck. He was different. Ruthless, precise. A man who didn't come for you unless the decision had already been made. Someone had paid the price, pulled the trigger metaphorically, and Taylor was the bullet, and bullets didn't stop until they hit their target. Charlie's mind dragged him backward to the deal that had started all this. A week ago, he'd met with a buyer in a crumbling warehouse by the docks. The air had smelled of rust and salt water, the walls sweating moisture. The man, one of the Callahan crew, had wanted intel on a shipment. Drugs? Weapons? Maybe both. Charlie hadn't cared. Information was information, and the money on the table was more than enough to silence his conscience. But that shipment had belonged to the Robinson family. Charlie hadn't realized it at first. It was just another job, another envelope of cash tucked into his jacket. But the whispers started almost immediately. Men going missing. Others beaten until they couldn't walk, and Robinson's name slipping through hushed voices like a curse. That's when Charlie understood what he'd sold. Not just information, not just leverage. He'd sold a piece of Taylor Robinson's empire, and Taylor didn't forgive. Charlie's jaw clenched as he stared at the man across the room. He remembered another face years ago, from when he was younger, dumber, still cutting his teeth in the business. A man named Harris. Back then, Harris had crossed the wrong crew, taken money from both sides of a deal. They'd found him a week later in an alley, eyes wide open, lips sewn shut. Everyone knew who'd done it, though no one said his name out loud. Robinson. He was younger then, but his work had already carried his signature. Clean, cruel, permanent. Charlie felt the weight of that memory pressing on him now. He'd laughed at Harris back then, chalked it up as another lesson about greed. But now he was Harris. The bar door creaked as another drunk stumbled in, shaking rain from his coat. The jukebox clicked to a new song. Low and mournful, a soundtrack that fit too well. Charlie shifted on his stool, the leather squeaking, and forced himself to stand. If Robinson was going to make his move, Charlie wasn't going to wait for it in O'Malley's bar like a sitting duck. He turned toward the exit, ignoring O'Malley's look of quiet desperation. "You walk out that door?" O'Malley muttered. "You're walking into his game." Charlie shot him a thin smile. "I've been in his game since the moment I said yes to that deal." The rain was colder now, cutting against his skin as he stepped back onto the street. The city looked different, emptier, more dangerous. Every shadow seemed thicker, every alley a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. He pulled his collar up and lit another cigarette, the flame trembling in the wind. For a block, he didn't look back. He didn't have to. He could feel Robinson behind him like a shadow stitched to his heels. Charlie's mind spun, searching for options. He thought of Maria. Sweet, stubborn Maria, who once told him he'd end up dead in a gutter if he didn't quit. He'd laughed at her back then, said death was just another part of the bargain when you lived off the streets. Now, her voice echoed in his head like a warning too late to follow. He thought of his brother too, Michael. Younger, cleaner, the one who'd gone straight, working a 9 to 5 in another city. They hadn't spoken in years. Charlie wondered if Michael would even care when he heard the news, or if he'd just shake his head and say, "I told you so." The past wasn't just ghosts. It was a weight, and Charlie felt it pressing harder with every step. He cut into another alley, the city's veins running dark and narrow. His boots splashed through puddles, the sound of footsteps still behind him. Always behind him. He spun suddenly, pulling the small revolver from his jacket, the metal slick in his hand. "Come on!" he shouted into the rain. His voice cracked, but he pushed harder. "You gonna keep watching me, Robinson? Or you gonna finish what you came here for?" The alley swallowed his voice, the rain smothering its edges. For a long moment nothing moved. Then, from the far end of the alley, a figure stepped forward. Tall, lean, coat black as tar. Robinson? His face was calm, unreadable, his pace unhurried. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't flinch at the revolver aimed square at his chest. He just kept walking, as though Charlie's panic, Charlie's desperation, were nothing more than background noise. Charlie's grip tightened, knuckles white. He wanted to fire, to end it before it began, but his hand shook. The rain blurred his vision, dripping into his eyes. "You don't scare me." Charlie lied, his voice breaking. Robinson stopped only when he was close enough for Charlie to see the raindrops sliding down his face. His eyes, cold and glassy, locked onto Charlie's, and for a moment everything else vanished. The city, the rain, the fear. Just those eyes, empty and merciless. Charlie's finger twitched on the trigger, but Robinson only tilted his head slightly, as if studying him. Judging, deciding. Then, without a word, he stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. Charlie stood frozen, the revolver shaking in his hand, his chest heaving. The alley was empty again, but the silence screamed louder than before. Robinson hadn't come to kill him tonight? Not yet. He'd come to remind Charlie that death was patient, and it was closer than ever. Charlie Krik didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay on the stained mattress in his one-room apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, while the rain tapped against the window like restless fingers. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Robinson's face, calm, detached, those eyes that reflected nothing back. He'd been in plenty of bad situations before. He'd been beaten, cornered, double-crossed, even shot at. But this was different. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't some rival crew looking to make a quick point. This was slow, deliberate, and it was eating at him in ways he didn't want to admit. He lit another cigarette, the smoke curling into the dark like whispers. The clock on the wall ticked too loud, each second reminding him of the silence that pressed against the walls of his room. Robinson was out there, waiting, watching. Maybe across the street right now. Maybe closer. Charlie dragged his hands over his face and muttered, "You're losing it, Krik. You're letting him get inside your head." But wasn't that the point? Robinson wasn't just hunting him. He was dismantling him piece by piece. Charlie could feel it, like someone loosening the screws of his life one by one, letting everything collapse under its own weight. By morning, the rain had eased, but the city felt heavier. Charlie threw on his jacket, shoved the revolver into his waistband, and headed out. He needed air. He needed noise, movement, people, anything to drown out the silence that Robinson left in his wake. The streets were alive again, commuters rushing, vendors shouting, cars honking. Charlie walked fast, scanning every face, every corner. He didn't see Robinson, but that meant nothing. The man could be anywhere, blending in, invisible, until he chose not to be. Charlie ducked into a diner on the east side. Not Mel's this time, too obvious. He ordered eggs, toast, and black coffee, though his stomach twisted at the thought of eating. The waitress gave him a smile too bright for the morning, but Charlie didn't bother returning it. He sat with his back to the wall, eyes on the door. As he picked at his food, memories crept in again. Years back, when he first started running information, He'd crossed paths with Robinson, not directly, but close enough. It was during a deal gone wrong, a bloody mess in an abandoned warehouse. Charlie hadn't been there, but he'd heard the whispers the next day. Robinson had walked in, calm as ever, and when he walked out, 3 men were left behind with their throats cut. No witnesses, no noise, just silence. That was Robinson's signature, silence. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He erased. And now, Charlie felt that silence stretching toward him, inevitable, suffocating. Halfway through his coffee, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He froze. For a long second, he just stared at it, the vibration rattling the table. Finally, he picked it up and pressed it to his ear. Nothing. Just silence. "Hello?" Charlie snapped. Still nothing. Just the faint sound of static, like someone breathing on the other end. Charlie's throat went dry. He slammed the phone shut and shoved it back into his pocket. His hand trembling, he knew who it was. He didn't need to hear a voice. Robinson was letting him know he could reach him anywhere. Anytime. Charlie left cash on the table and walked out, his pulse hammering. The city spun around him, voices and car horns colliding, but he felt utterly alone. Every stranger's glance burned into him. Every reflection in every window made him flinch. By afternoon, he was back at O'Malley's, storming into the dim bar with a desperation he couldn't hide. O'Malley looked up from polishing glasses and sighed. "You look worse," he said. Charlie slammed his hands on the bar. "I need more than whiskey this time. I need answers." O'Malley hesitated, then poured him a drink anyway. "What answers you think I got, Krik? You know what Robinson is. He doesn't stop. He doesn't miss. You're already marked." Charlie downed the whiskey in one swallow, slamming the glass down. "There's always a way. Everyone's got a weakness. Even him." But the words rang hollow in his mouth. O'Malley leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You're thinking about this all wrong. Robinson isn't just a man. He's a message. When he comes for you, it's because somebody wanted you gone. And he makes damn sure everyone remembers what happens when you cross them. That's the point. That's why there are no survivors, no stories, just silence." Charlie gritted his teeth, his fists clenching. He wanted to believe Robinson could be outsmarted, tricked, beaten. But deep down, he knew O'Malley was right. This wasn't just personal. This was business, ritual, inevitability. The bar's door creaked. Charlie stiffened, his eyes snapping toward it. But it wasn't Robinson this time. Just a woman, raincoat dripping, eyes tired from the day. She gave Charlie a fleeting glance before taking a seat at the far end. Still, his heart wouldn't slow. He felt the weight of Robinson even when he wasn't there. Especially when he wasn't there. Later that night, Charlie sat in his apartment again, the revolver on the table in front of him. He poured himself a drink, the liquid trembling in the glass, and stared at the weapon. He'd killed before, but this felt different. This wasn't a gunfight in an alley, a deal gone wrong. This was a duel he hadn't asked for, against a man who'd already decided the ending. The phone buzzed again. Charlie froze. He picked it up slowly, pressed it to his ear. This time, there was a voice, calm, quiet, steady. "Charlie Krik, Robinson." Charlie's chest tightened. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, everything ends in silence. The line went dead. Charlie dropped the phone, his breath ragged, the words echoing in his skull. He looked at the revolver again, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if it would save him, or if it was already too late. Charlie Krik had always believed survival was about staying one step ahead. Outthink the muscle, outtalk the bosses, outlast the chaos. But for the first time in years, he felt himself slipping behind, the ground giving way beneath his feet. Taylor Robinson wasn't chasing him like a man, he was circling like a predator. Patient, silent, certain. The words from the phone call, "Everything ends in silence," wouldn't leave him. They echoed through every corner of his apartment, through every street he walked, through every bar where he tried to drown them with whiskey. It was more than a threat. It was a sentence. Charlie hadn't eaten in 2 days. His eyes were sunken, his hands jittery, and his jacket smelled of cigarettes and rain. He looked less like the clever broker who knew everyone's secrets and more like the corpse he feared he was about to become. But he wasn't ready to roll over. Not yet. That night he armed himself. The revolver wasn't enough. He dug out a rusty switchblade he hadn't touched in years, slipped it into his pocket, and tucked a spare magazine of bullets into his jacket. His reflection in the mirror was grim, almost unrecognizable. "You want a fight, Robinson?" he muttered. "Then you'll get one." But deep down he knew he wasn't the hunter here. The streets were quieter that night, the rain finally giving way to a low mist that curled along the pavement. Charlie moved fast, his head down, his nerves sparking with every echo. He wasn't just walking. He was hunting shadows, waiting for Robinson to appear, daring him to make a move. He made his way to the docks, a place he usually avoided after dark. The air smelled of salt and oil, ropes creaked against the wooden posts, and ships loomed like black skeletons in the fog. If Robinson was going to come for him, Charlie figured this was as good a stage as any. No crowds, no witnesses, just the two of them. He waited. Minutes bled into hours. His nerves frayed, his cigarette butts piling up at his feet. The mist wrapped around him, cold and suffocating. He thought he heard footsteps more than once, the scrape of a shoe on wood, the whisper of fabric brushing against steel. But every time he spun with his revolver raised, the dock was empty. Robinson wasn't here. Not yet. But the waiting was worse. By dawn, Charlie staggered back toward the city, exhaustion dragging at his bones. He hadn't caught Robinson. He hadn't even glimpsed him. But somehow he felt like the man had been there all along, watching, amused at the little trap Charlie had set for himself. Back in the city, he headed for O'Malley's again, desperate for another voice, another face. He pushed through the door, his boots heavy, and dropped onto a stool. "You look like death," O'Malley muttered. "Feels about right," Charlie rasped. O'Malley slid a glass across the bar. "You can't win this, Krik. Not against him." The Robinsons built their empire on silence and fear. Taylor, he's not like the others. He doesn't break. He doesn't bargain. He finishes. Charlie's hand trembled around the glass. "There's always a way." "Always." O'Malley leaned closer. "Then you better find it fast. Because if he's speaking to you, if he's letting you know he's there, it means he's already decided when." Charlie's stomach nodded. When? Not if. He left O'Malley's with whiskey burning in his throat and dread coiling in his gut. The city felt smaller now, every corner closing in. He couldn't shake the feeling that Robinson was already there, in every shadow, in every passing glance. By evening, Charlie was back in his apartment, pacing like a caged animal. He checked the locks twice, 3 times. He pulled the blinds shut. He kept the revolver in his hand, the metal warm from his grip. Then the phone buzzed again. Charlie froze. He lifted it slowly, pressed it to his ear. This time there was no silence. There was a sound, a low hum, steady and chilling, and beneath it the faintest rhythm. Footsteps, slow, unhurried. Charlie's breath hitched. "Where are you?" No answer. Just the steps, getting closer. "Damn it, Robinson." "Where the hell are you?" The line went dead. Charlie's hand shook as he lowered the phone. His apartment suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. He spun toward the door, toward the window, toward every corner where a shadow could hide. Nothing, and yet he knew. Robinson had been outside, maybe across the street, maybe right at his door. He'd let Charlie hear him, let him know the walls were closing in. Charlie didn't sleep that night either. He sat in the dark, revolver across his knees, his ears straining for every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind. When dawn broke, he was still there, eyes bloodshot, heart hammering. The silence pressed harder, thicker. He knew it now. Robinson wasn't just after his life. He was after his mind. Charlie poured himself another drink with trembling hands, muttering to the empty room, "You won't break me. You won't." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it, because somewhere in the silence, he swore he could hear footsteps again. And this time, he didn't know if they were outside his door or already inside. Charlie Krik's apartment had become a prison, not because of locks or walls, but because of silence. He sat in the dark, revolver heavy in his hand, listening to a city that seemed to have turned against him. Every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the pipes, every distant siren outside felt like a signal, like Taylor Robinson breathing down his neck. The phone hadn't rung again, but that didn't comfort him. If anything, it made the silence worse. Silence meant Robinson was preparing. Silence meant Robinson was moving. Charlie couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his jacket, shoved the revolver into his waistband, and stepped out into the night. The city air slapped him cold and damp, and the neon signs bled into the wet streets. He needed noise, people, anything to drown out the gnawing quiet. He headed for the south side, where the streets were busier even at midnight. Clubs thumped with bass. Men shouted over dice games in alleys. Women laughed too loud under flickering street lamps. For a moment, Charlie almost felt safe in the chaos. Almost. He found himself in Murphy's, a dive bar that stank of sweat and spilled beer. The room buzzed with drunks and hustlers, voices bouncing off the cracked walls. Charlie slid into a corner booth, ordered whiskey, and scanned the room. No sign of Robinson, no black coat, no glassy eyes. But that didn't mean he wasn't there. Charlie's fingers drummed on the table. His nerves screamed. He felt like a man on stage, the crowd cheering while the hangman's rope waited in the wings. 2 drinks in, he finally caught movement. A figure stepping through the door. Tall, lean, black coat. Robinson. Charlie's chest seized. He forced himself to stay seated, to look casual, though every muscle begged him to run. Robinson didn't glance around. He didn't scan the bar like a man entering new territory. He already knew the layout, already knew who was here. His eyes moved once, landing on Charlie, and stayed there. Charlie's throat went dry. He tightened his grip on the glass, his reflection trembling in the amber liquid. Robinson didn't move toward him. Not yet. He leaned against the bar, ordered a drink, and waited. Charlie felt the trap closing. If he left, Robinson would follow. If he stayed, Robinson would wait until he cracked. Either way, the noose tightened. He swallowed hard and stood, forcing himself to walk toward the bar. Each step felt heavier than the last. He stopped 2 stools away from Robinson, ordered another whiskey, and lit a cigarette. The silence between them was suffocating. Finally, Charlie spoke, his voice low, cracked. "You planning to kill me, or just watch me fall apart first?" Robinson didn't turn his head, didn't blink. He just took a slow sip of his drink. Charlie let out a humorless laugh. "That's it. Nothing. You're really gonna drag this out." Still nothing. Charlie slammed his glass down, the sound sharp. "You think you're some kind of ghost. "Robinson, you're not untouchable. You bleed like the rest of us." Robinson finally moved, slowly. His head turned, his eyes meeting Charlie's. Cold, glassy, unfeeling. And then, just a whisper, so soft Charlie almost thought he imagined it. "Run." The word slithered into Charlie's bones, freezing him where he stood. Robinson didn't move again. He just turned back to his drink, as though the conversation were finished. Charlie staggered back, heart hammering. He pushed through the crowd, out the door, into the night. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind spinning. "Run." The word echoed like a command, like a curse. He sprinted through the streets, rain pelting down again, his boots splashing through puddles. He didn't know where he was going. Just away, anywhere away. He cut through alleys, vaulted fences, his lungs burning. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, the shadows seemed to stretch, shift, chase him. By the time he stopped, bent over and gasping, he realized he was back at the docks, the same place he'd waited the night before. But this time, Robinson was waiting. Charlie froze. The figure stepped out of the mist, coat dripping with rain, eyes fixed on him calm. Steady, silent. Charlie fumbled for his revolver, yanking it out with shaking hands. "Stay back!" he shouted, his voice cracking. Robinson kept walking slow, unhurried. Like a man with all the time in the world, Charlie's finger twitched on the trigger. "I swear to God, I'll shoot." Robinson stopped, tilted his head slightly, studying him like prey caught in a snare. Then, in a blur, he moved, faster than Charlie expected. He closed the distance in 2 steps, one hand snapping the revolver aside as the other slammed into Charlie's gut. The air whooshed out of him, the gun clattering to the ground. Charlie stumbled back, clutching his stomach. Robinson didn't follow. He stood still, letting Charlie catch his breath, letting the fear settle deeper. Charlie scrambled for the revolver, but when his fingers brushed it, Robinson's boot pinned it to the ground. Those eyes bore into him again, cold, glassy, merciless. Robinson leaned down, his voice a whisper. "Not yet." Then he stepped back, disappearing into the mist as quickly as he'd appeared. Charlie collapsed against the wet wood, gasping, shaking. He stared at the revolver under the rain, useless in his hand. Robinson could have killed him, easily. But he didn't, because this wasn't about the kill. Not yet. This was about breaking him. The rain hadn't stopped when Charlie Krik dragged himself back from the docks. Soaked to the bone, lungs burning, knees weak. Robinson had been there, real, solid, unstoppable. And yet he hadn't finished it. He'd spared Charlie, not out of mercy but cruelty. Not yet. The words clung to Charlie's skin like the rain, chilling him to the marrow. Robinson was in control, pulling strings while Charlie danced like a marionette. Every day, every night, the silence pressed harder, squeezing the air out of him. He couldn't live like this, so he made a decision. If Robinson wasn't going to end it, then Charlie would. Not by rolling over, not by waiting. He was done being the hunted. Back in his apartment, he tore the place apart. Blueprints, maps, a stack of old contacts scribbled on napkins and matchbooks. He spread them across the table, cigarette smoke curling into the dim light. His revolver sat in front of him, loaded, polished, waiting. He thought of all the whispers he'd heard about Robinson over the years. A man with no past, no weakness, no family. A shadow who lived in silence. But even shadows needed places to hide. Charlie remembered the South Docks warehouse, a place the Robinson family had been rumored to use for shipments no one wanted documented. Guns, drugs, bodies. If Robinson had a sanctuary, Charlie figured that was it. He was going to take the fight there. The next night, he moved with a purpose he hadn't felt in weeks. The city blurred past him as he slipped through alleys and side streets, the revolver heavy in his coat pocket. He carried more than the gun now. He had a jag bottle, the old switchblade, anything that could cut, puncture, kill. His nerves screamed, but his determination burned hotter. The warehouse loomed at the edge of the docks, its corrugated steel walls streaked with rust, its windows black with grime. A single bulb swung above the door, buzzing faintly. Charlie pressed himself against the wall, listening. Nothing but the hum of the bulb and the distant lap of water. He slipped inside. The air was stale, thick with dust and oil. Wooden crates lined the walls, some marked with faded shipping labels, others unmarked. Silent witnesses to whatever sins they'd carried. The place smelled of old blood. Charlie crept deeper, revolver raised, every step measured. His boots echoed faintly, too loud in the cavernous space. He kept glancing over his shoulder, certain Robinson would materialize behind him at any second. Then he saw it. In the center of the warehouse, a chair, simple, wooden, empty, but on the floor beside it a rope coiled neatly, and next to that a single knife. Clean, waiting. Charlie's chest tightened. A trap. He spun toward the door, but it was already too late. The overhead bulb flickered. Once, twice, then went dark. Charlie's breath hitched. He raised the revolver, his ears straining in the blackness. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from everywhere at once. "Show yourself!" Charlie barked, his voice cracking. No answer. Just the sound of boots on concrete circling. Charlie fired into the dark. The gunshot cracked through the warehouse, deafening, echoing. The muzzle flash lit nothing but crates and shadows. "Come on!" "Robinson!" he screamed. "You think you've got me? You hear me? You don't." Silence. Then, from the shadows, a whisper. Closer. Charlie spun, firing again. The bullet sparked against steel, ricocheting into the void. He stumbled backward, sweat dripping down his temples, his lungs heaving. The footsteps stopped. The silence roared. And then a hand brushed his shoulder. Charlie whirled, slashing wildly with the switchblade. The blade cut nothing but air. He staggered breathless, spinning in circles. His revolver clicked empty. He hadn't even realized he'd pulled the trigger until the chamber snapped hollow. From the dark, the whisper again. "Not yet." Charlie's scream tore through the warehouse, raw and desperate. He hurled the empty gun, the clatter echoing uselessly. He collapsed against a crate, dragging in ragged breaths. When the bulb flickered back to life, the warehouse was empty. The chair, the rope, the knife, all gone. No footsteps, no whisper, no Robinson, only silence. Charlie pressed his hands to his face, trembling. He'd come to hunt Robinson, but Robinson had been hunting him all along. Even here, even in what was supposed to be his move. He was nothing more than a mouse in the trap. When he finally staggered out into the night, his body shook with exhaustion, his mind unraveling thread by thread. He wasn't sure how much longer he could last. But one thing was clear. Robinson wasn't just waiting to kill him. He was stripping him bare, piece by piece, until there would be nothing left. Charlie Krik hadn't slept in days. Not real sleep. Just flashes, half an hour with his eyes closed before jolting awake, drenched in sweat, revolver clutched to his chest. Every time he drifted off, he heard its footsteps in the hall, whispers in the walls, the echo of Taylor Robinson's voice telling him what he already knew. Not yet. The city had become a nightmare. Every face looked like Robinson's. Every passerby wore the same black coat in his imagination. Every bar, every alley, every dock felt like a stage where the predator was already waiting in the wings. Charlie stopped going to O'Malley's, stopped calling the last of his contacts, stopped trusting anyone. All he had left was the silence. It pressed against him in his apartment, thick as smoke. He'd keep the radio on just to break it, but even the voices of the announcers warped after a while, their words twisting into whispers that seemed aimed only at him. Run closer, not yet. Charlie started talking back, muttering to the walls, shouting at shadows. His own voice became his company, rough and cracked from whiskey and cigarettes. You think you've got me, Robinson? You think I'm finished? I'm still standing, still breathing. You can't break me? But his reflection in the bathroom mirror told another story. Hollow eyes, skin gray, lips cracked. A man unraveling. One night, the phone rang again. Charlie's heart lurched. He snatched it up with shaking hands, pressing it to his ear. Silence. He squeezed his eyes shut, gripping the receiver so tight his knuckles turned white. Say it, damn you! Say something. Nothing. He slammed the phone down, but the silence didn't stop. It only thickened, heavier, crushing his chest until he staggered against the wall, gasping for breath. He clawed at his shirt, at his throat, certain he was suffocating. Then he realized he was sobbing. For the first time in years, Charlie Krik was crying. He sank to the floor, revolver clattering beside him, and wept like a man already dead. The next day, the city looked different. Not alive, not bustling, but hollow, as if Robinson's silence had spread through the streets like a sickness. Charlie wandered aimlessly, revolver tucked into his waistband, muttering under his breath. People gave him wide berth. They didn't need to know his story. They could smell the madness on him. At one point, he thought he saw Robinson across the street, standing by a lamppost, black coat, still watching. Charlie froze, his heart racing, hand twitching toward the revolver. But when a bus passed between them and the figure disappeared, he wasn't sure if Robinson had ever been there at all. By dusk, Charlie found himself back at the docks again. He didn't even remember walking there. The mist curled around him like fingers, and the water slapped against the wood with a hollow rhythm. He sat on the edge of the pier, revolver in his lap, staring into the black water. His reflection wavered, fractured by ripples. He thought of letting the gun slip from his hand, thought of letting himself slide into the water, letting the silence swallow him whole. But then he heard it, footsteps, slow, deliberate. Charlie's breath caught. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. Robinson? He whispered, voice raw. The footsteps stopped. Charlie lifted the revolver with trembling hands, aiming into the mist without looking. End it. You hear me? Do it now. No more games. No more silence. Nothing. Just the mist. Charlie's hand shook so violently the revolver rattled. He let out a ragged scream, firing into the fog. The gunshot cracked through the night, echoing across the water. The recoil nearly knocked the weapon from his hands. When the echo faded, there was only silence again. Charlie spun around, but the pier was empty. No Robinson, no footsteps. Just the mist and the endless, suffocating quiet. He dropped to his knees, revolver hanging from his hand, chest heaving. His screams dissolved into broken laughter, harsh, hollow, mad. Robinson didn't need to kill him. He was already dying. By the time Charlie staggered back to his apartment, dawn was breaking, painting the city in gray light. He locked the door, drew the blinds, and collapsed into the chair by the window. His revolver rested across his knees. The silence pressed in again, heavier than ever. Charlie Krik knew he couldn't take much more. And somewhere in that silence, he swore he heard a whisper, soon. Charlie Krik no longer knew what day it was. The city outside his apartment moved on with its usual rhythm. Cars, voices, laughter, but inside, time had rotted away. He hadn't shaved. His meals were nothing but scraps of bread and whiskey. The revolver stayed with him always, a steel extension of his hand. Every sound was Robinson. Every silence, too. He'd stopped answering the phone, stopped opening the door. The world beyond those four walls didn't matter anymore. The only world that existed was the one where Taylor Robinson's footsteps were always coming closer. But even a trapped animal eventually bares its teeth. That night, Charlie made a choice. No more running. No more waiting. If Robinson wanted him, he would find him ready. He lit a cigarette, smoke curling into the stale air, and checked the revolver one last time. 6 bullets. He slid it into his jacket, slipped the switchblade into his pocket, and tucked a broken whiskey bottle into his waistband. Tools of desperation, but tools nonetheless. He left the apartment just after midnight. The streets were wet, glistening under the dim lamps. He moved fast, head down, heart pounding. The docks again. Always the docks. The place where Robinson had revealed himself, where the whispers had grown loudest. If there was going to be an ending, it would be there. The mist hung thick as Charlie approached, swallowing the world in pale gray. He gripped the revolver, finger brushing the trigger. Every step echoed too loud against the wood, bouncing back at him like mocking laughter. And then he saw him, Robinson, standing at the end of the pier, coat black against the mist, perfectly still. Charlie froze. His breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled, but he forced the revolver up, aiming straight at Robinson's chest. "It ends tonight." Charlie's voice cracked, half scream, half sob. "No more silence! No more games! You hear me?" Robinson didn't move, didn't flinch. His eyes gleamed faintly in the mist, cold and glassy, reflecting nothing. Charlie's finger squeezed the trigger. The gun roared. The bullet cut through the mist, but Robinson didn't fall, didn't bleed, didn't even twitch. Charlie's stomach dropped. He fired again, and again. 3, 4, 5 shots. The revolver kicked against his hand, smoke burning his nostrils. When the echoes faded, Robinson still stood there, untouched. Charlie staggered back, horror clawing at his throat. He looked at the revolver, empty. He'd unloaded everything, and Robinson remained. No, that's not possible. Robinson finally moved. One step forward. Slow. Deliberate. Charlie's breath came in ragged gasps. He fumbled for the switchblade, flipping it open with shaking hands. "Stay back!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "I swear I'll cut you down." Robinson didn't stop. Another step, then another. His boots tapped softly against the wood, a rhythm that drilled into Charlie's skull. Charlie swung the blade wildly, his arm jerking like a man possessed. "I'm not afraid of you. You hear me? I'm not afraid." But his voice betrayed him. Robinson closed the distance. Close enough now that Charlie could see the rain beating on his coat, could smell the faint scent of gun oil and damp earth. His eyes locked onto Charlie's. 2 pits of silence, endless and merciless. Charlie's arm faltered. His grip on the blade slipped. His chest heaved with sobs he couldn't hold back. "Why me?" he whispered. Why won't you just end it?" For the first time, Robinson spoke more than a whisper. His voice was low, steady, as inevitable as the tide. "Because you broke yourself." The blade fell from Charlie's hand, clattering to the wood. His knees buckled. He was shaking so violently he could barely keep upright. Robinson reached out, slow and calm, and placed a single hand on Charlie's shoulder. The touch was light, almost gentle. But to Charlie, it felt like the weight of death itself. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing openly now, the last of his defiance shattered. Robinson leaned close, his lips near Charlie's ear. "Tomorrow." Then he stepped back, fading into the mist until there was nothing left but silence. Charlie knelt there for what felt like hours, shaking, broken. His revolver lay empty beside him, his blade useless, his will destroyed. He knew what tomorrow meant. It meant the end. And for the first time, he realized he wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of one more night of silence. Charlie Krik had never known a night so long. After Robinson whispered tomorrow on that pier, the world seemed to freeze. Hours bled into hours, but the silence carried more weight than time itself. Charlie sat in his apartment with the revolver across his lap. Empty. He hadn't reloaded it. He hadn't the strength. Beside him, the switchblade lay folded, useless. He stared at them like old relics, tools that had once given him courage. Now they were just dead weight. He lit cigarette after cigarette, filling the room with smoke until his eyes stung. His hands trembled, not from withdrawal, but from the knowledge that tonight would be his last night alive. Robinson was coming. Not with fanfare, not with noise. He would arrive the way he always had, quiet, patient, inevitable. Charlie tried to fight it. He poured whiskey, gulped it down, muttered to himself, paced the room. He even pressed the empty revolver to his temple, daring himself to pull the trigger, to rob Robinson of the satisfaction. But he couldn't do it. He didn't want the silence to win that way. He wanted to face him. The knock came just after midnight. Soft. 3 taps. Charlie's heart jolted. His mouth went dry. His knees threatened to give. He staggered to the door, revolver in hand, though it held no bullets. He pressed his forehead against the wood, his breath shallow. Another knock. Come in, Charlie rasped. His voice cracked. It's your stage now. The lock clicked. The door eased open. Taylor Robinson stepped inside. Tall, calm, coat dripping with rain. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Cold, glassy, unyielding. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the world, sealing them both in silence. Charlie raised the revolver, arm trembling. It's empty, he admitted, his laugh hollow. But I figure you knew that already. Robinson didn't speak, didn't move. Charlie dropped the gun. It clattered to the floor, useless as his pride. He sank into the chair by the window, staring at the man who had unraveled him piece by piece. Why me? Charlie whispered. His voice was hoarse, raw. Out of all the men in this city, why'd you choose me? Robinson finally moved, stepping closer, his shadow falling over Charlie. His voice came low, steady. Because you couldn't keep quiet. Charlie blinked. For a moment, confusion cut through his fear. That's it. Because I talked too much. Robinson's gaze didn't waver. You made a living selling whispers, trading silence for noise. Men like you forget. Noise dies fast. Silence lives forever. Charlie's laugh turned bitter. He wiped at his eyes with shaking hands. So that's it. You're the punishment. The hand that makes silence permanent. Robinson said nothing. He didn't need to. The truth was already written across Charlie's broken face. Charlie leaned back, closing his eyes. His voice came softer now, almost calm. Do it then. End it. I can't take another night. Robinson reached into his coat. The knife gleamed as he drew it, the steel catching the dim light. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, the way he always did. Charlie didn't flinch, didn't beg. For the first time in weeks, he felt no fear, only relief. The blade slid clean. Silent, Charlie gasped once, then slumped, his body going still. The smoke from his last cigarette curled upward, lingering in the air before fading into nothing. Taylor Robinson stood over him, calm as ever. No expression. No sound. He wiped the blade clean, slipped it back into his coat, and turned toward the door. As he stepped into the night, the city swallowed him again. No witnesses. No noise. Only silence. And in that silence, one truth became certain: Charlie Krik was gone. Taylor Robinson remained.